Guy Britton here with ILIO. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, we're going to be looking at how we can create unique and convincing drum reverbs using the awesome REmatrix plugin from Overloud. Let's jump in and take a look at what's going on. So more often than not, what makes a great sounding drum recording is the room in which the drums are recorded in. In a lot of big studios, they'll often have a large purpose-built live room with a pair of stereo mics up, recording the ambience of the kit in the room. And this drum ambience is what gives the kit the energy and the cohesiveness that we're used to hearing on a record. Unfortunately, for most of us, we don't have the space to be recording drums in a large, expensive live room. So often we end up having to fake it using various reverb plugins and delays and tricks and techniques. So today we're going to be looking at how we can do that using the REmatrix plugin from Overloud. So at the moment I have this drum recording here, which is some drums recorded in a very small sort of boxy room, and there is a mono room mic on this track which sounds okay, but it doesn't sound great. The track is very roomy and spacious, and we want to enhance that room mic to make it fit with the rest of the track and give the drums a bigger feel. And we're going to do that using the REmatrix plugin from Overloud. So let me play you a bit of this track. We'll have a listen to what the drums sound like and what that room mic sounds like in particular, and then we'll look at how we can enhance it using REmatrix. So as you can see, we have these close mics up here, the kick in, kick out, the snare mics, the tom mics, the overheads, and then this room mic. Now this room mic, as I say, is a mono mic recorded in a pretty small boxy room, and it doesn't sound great. So what we want to do is try and give it more of a stereo, wider feel, make it feel like it was recorded in a bigger room, and then blend that back in with the rest of the kit to give the kit some more energy and a more convincing feel. So you see at the minute I have this one instance of REmatrix inserted on this channel. If I bring this up, you can see here now we have these 5 different faders across here. Now this is what makes REmatrix different to a lot of other reverb plugins, in the sense that most reverb plugins, particularly ones that we would use for room mics, are using impulse responses or IRs. And what that is basically a signal that's recorded in a room and then captures the sound of the room that can then be loaded into a reverb plugin so that we can sort of emulate the sound of that room. What makes REmatrix different is that it allows us to blend different IRs from different rooms and different size spaces to create this sort of perfect sounding reverb for any particular application. So in this case, what we can do is we can blend an impulse response from a hall, from a room, from a plate. Early is like early reflection, so often the kind of a slap bag, very small sounding thing. And then special is various different sort of special effects types, reverbs, spring reverbs, and so on. And this is really cool because this allows us to mix and match from various different sources and blend certain parts of different rooms and so on to create a great sounding reverb. So if I just go ahead and enable this instance of REmatrix on this mono room mic, and we'll see what difference this is making immediately. I've got a few different IRs pulled up here already. I have one for a hall, one for a room, and one early reflections one. And let's take a listen to what this sounds like just with it enabled, and then we'll have a listen to what difference it's making straight off the bat. So you can hear just me enabling that with those 3 different impulse responses that I've already added immediately changes the feel and the sound of that room mic and makes it sound like a bigger, more energetic room. And to me, it's a really convincing reverb sound straight away as well. I haven't even done anything to it. It's just literally those impulse responses loaded up. Over here, we have a dry and a wet control, so I can blend the balance between that initial mono room mic and the reverbs that are being added through REmatrix. So if we take a look at how this works, you can see that we have these different impulse responses that are being blended together, and each of these impulse responses can be loaded from these different banks that we have up here. So there's loads of different banks that are included within the REmatrix library just as it is, but then we can add in even more packs. So at the moment, I'm working with the Dusty Racks Volume 2 pack, which contains a bunch of different impulse responses modeled from old hardware reverb units, which you can see in here. So for example, we've got the MV2, which is the Alesis MIDI Verb. We've got the LX300, which is the Lexicon 300. Loads of different presets from the old hardware, which have been captured using impulse responses. And then we can load them into this IR mixer down here. So at the moment, what I'm working with is this Studio A preset for the room, which sounds like this. And then that's being blended with this early reflection, which is the Dusty Racks Ambience 2 preset. If I blend those two impulse responses together, it sounds like this. And just blending that early reflection in helps to give the drums a more convincing feel, make them sound even roomier, because you're having that like initial slapback from the early reflection. What we can also do if we want is to go down here. So I can take this room, for example, and I can extend the reverb time of this. So I could increase this up to, say, let's go 20% longer. Or I can shorten it and have a snappier, tighter sounding room. I quite like that at minus 11%. It's just adjusting the length of that room slightly so that it doesn't feel too long and too sloppy. And let's hear that with the rest of the kit. So that early reflection is adding loads. Like without it, it sounds a little bit flat, and that early reflection is making it sound way more convincing, really bringing the kit together, making it sound much more cohesive. All right, that's sounding good. I'm wondering if I can just add even more depth and dimension to this. So at the minute I have this whole setting here, and that sounds like this. So you can see up here, there's like a pre-delay here. So it's a little later, and that's adding some length to that. If I just blend this in much quieter, we'll see how that sounds. That's quite cool because it's adding some length to the drums now. I just wonder if it's maybe making it a little bit sloppy. So let's see if we can swap that out for something else. So in order to change the preset, all we need to do is go down here to this extended panel part, and this opens up the library for this particular impulse response part of the mixer. And at the minute I'm using the Rev Mod preset. Let's try something like, let's try Mute Dark. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, that's quite cool. Mix that in with the rest of it. Yeah, that's really starting to sound like a proper room mic now on a kit. The only thing for me is that it's a little boomy, that particular reverb preset. And I feel like there's maybe a bit too much low end now because it's quite wide. It just feels like it's getting a bit muddy. So what we can do is go over here to this EQ section, and you'll see we've got a gain, and we can select the type, so whether it's low shelf or high pass filter. In this case, let's use a low shelf just to be gentle with it, and we just gain down some of that. And what that's going to do is just apply this EQ to this particular part of the reverb. So in this case, it's the muted dark hall. We're only EQing that impulse response. And this is super powerful because most reverb plugins allow us to, manipulate an impulse response, but it doesn't allow us to add in various different impulse responses and EQ and treat them all differently. And that's where this is so powerful. So, you'll see on this one, I have different EQ going on the room to what I have going on here. And this just allows us to really fine tune that reverb sound. So we're going to take a little bit of low end away from that hall preset and see what it sounds like now. So you can hear how much difference it's making. It's so effective to really allow us to fine tune that. I've taken away a little bit of top end on that early reflection as well because it felt a little bit bright. You also see that we have these other controls down here such as stereo and length, so we can adjust the width of that hall. I like how it is at the minute, but if we wanted it to be a bit narrower, we could just turn that slider to the left and decrease the width of that hall. So then it becomes totally mono. Or conversely, let's just keep it in the middle where it was. So now that I've got the room sound, what I like to do here is to add some compression and some drive and some grit to those room mics, and just to give them a bit more energy and help them fit in the mix a bit more. And usually the way that I'd need to do that is to add more plugins to the chain. But the great thing about REmatrix is that we have some drive and some compression built in to this plugin. If I go down to this master section here, you'll see we have the reverbs all feeding through this chain here. And then up here, we've got drive, comp, and EQ. And in order to enable them, all we need to do is just double click to turn it on and off. So the drive now sounds like this. That's nice, just adding a bit of grit to the drums. And then we have the compressor. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the release super fast, and then let's just dial in that attack. That's cool. That's just adding a bit more energy, a bit more drive. Then we have the EQ. Just knocking off a bit of top end and a bit of low end to clean it up sort of in the extreme ends. I don't want it to be too bright. I don't want it to be too boomy in the low end. Let's hear that now within the context of the rest of the drum kit. Nice. And then let's take a listen to what that sounds like with the REmatrix on and off so we can hear what difference we've made. You can hear that just sounds totally different. Sounds so much better. Sounds like a real drum room that has so much more depth and width to it than what we had initially. From that boxy kind of tight room sound to this much bigger, ambient, more open drum sound. And it sounds really natural to me. It's just great. Like, I love how much flexibility this gives us. I love the fact that we can go in and be quite granular on all the details. And there's just so much to choose from here in terms of different presets and different packs that we can work with. Really loving how this sounds. So one more thing we can do with this. Currently, I've got this inserted just on the room mic as a plugin directly on the room mic chain. However, we can also use this from auxiliary sends in the way that we would normally use a reverb. So we might want to add something which is more of a sort of special effect type reverb. So it doesn't necessarily have to sound like a real convincing room mic. Now it's just about adding maybe some length to that snare and giving that snare a bit of its own sort of reverb and character. So at the minute I've got this snare top mic here, which is sending to this bus 8, which has an instance of REmatrix on it. Currently I'm using another impulse response, this time from the Dusty Racks Volume 1. This is the drum preset for the hall. Then I'm using this early reflections preset from the Volume 1 pack again. And then I have this MS&P, which is modulated springs and plates. And this has loads of cool, various different sort of spring reverbs and plate reverbs that sound quite dark and dirty. This is going to sound like this, just a bit of this coming off this snare top send. Let's hear that in the mix. That's really cool, because what we're doing here is we're adding a bit of this modulated spring, but we're also bringing in some early reflections and some hall reverb around it to just modify it a bit more, give it a sense of real space so that it doesn't sound sort of completely unusual and completely odd, because quite often You know, what I'm finding when I'm mixing is, if, say, for example, I set up a snare top mic with a send to a reverb, and it's like a plate reverb or it's a spring reverb, something which is a bit false, it tends to stick out quite a lot. And then I have to set up another send to another reverb, which is maybe more of a room reverb. And then I've got to set up another reverb, maybe to the main drum reverb. I'm trying to blend them all together in a way which gives me something that sounds cohesive rather than just sort of this one snare reverb which is poking out and sounds a bit odd. And this is kind of completely removing that now, because I'm able to blend these different reverbs in within the plugin and change them as I need to, tweak them as I need to with EQs, and I'm not having to set up loads of different sends with loads of different EQs on. It's all within one plugin, and that's just so useful. And I find the control panel here is really accessible. It's really easy to use. It's not unnecessarily cluttered with stuff that doesn't need to be there. Everything is within reach. It's super simple, and it's just really effective straight away. So let's take a listen one more time, this time with the room reverb muted and the snare reverb muted from REmatrix, and see what a difference we've made. Sounds great. And one final thing to mention as well is that, you know, you can blend these reverbs into taste to suit you. There's maybe a little bit too much room reverb and snare reverb going on there at the moment, but the power of REmatrix is the fact that it gives us so much control to be able to blend things to taste. So, you know, we could even go as far as automating this so that, like, maybe in the chorus we're having a wider reverb, in the verses we're having a narrower reverb, and maybe in certain sections of the song different impulse responses come in to give you different effects, and that just gives you so much more creative power. So I definitely recommend that you go and check out the REmatrix plugin from Overloud. Leave me a comment below and let me know how you're getting on with it. Like I say, there's so much to be unlocked within this plugin, and it would be great to hear how other people are using it in their mixes, what kind of applications you're using it for. So do that, go check it out right now, drop me a comment below, and hopefully I'll see you soon.